May 3rd of 2023, and I was on my commercial multi-engine Checkride flight.
Not a cloud in the sky, hardly a whisper of wind, and I just told Darlene, this is no challenge.
Like warming up, I'm like, okay, you know what, this is gonna be fine, it's just a Checkride. And we start setting up for a slow flight, and during that procedure, we hear a really loud bang, like it sounds like metal in the back of the plane.
It sounded like a shotgun going off, which is really not normal. As it got speed going down, and bang, it went all the way back to our chest again, and the airplane changed direction abruptly. We knew we couldn't control the plane, and we thought that something hit us.
I had a concussion. I was bleeding out.
When we were heading toward the ground, I mean vertically, right toward the ground, I remember we said out loud, not today, God, not today.
I had shared a little bit about it on Facebook, and this woman had commented on my post saying, "Your crash saved my life." I was like, what? Is this spam? And she said that she had seen my post about praying Psalm 23 like a week before her crash.
Have you ever had anything like this occur to you before?
I don't know if you heard of the event at Sioux City, Flight 232. But I was on that flight, but I wasn't the pilot. I was going to be a passenger. The plane went off and had that hydraulic failure, and all my friends who were in class with me going back to Chicago died in that crash. I didn't. Call it luck, call it fate, call it divine intervention, whatever you want to say. You basically live to fight another day. Well, then we get to this Seneca. Is that strike two? I don't know.
In this episode of Can You Explain It, we talked to a plane crash survivor who, against all odds, survived. In fact, the investigators on the scene said they've never been able to interview a pilot who was in this type of crash because they don't survive. And my question to you is, can you explain it?
Come and lay your hands on me, I believe. It's about time. I've been waiting for so long. It's about time. I can feel it coming on. There's a magic moment I've been hanging on. It's about time. It's about time.
Hi, Brad and John here, two friends traveling across the U.S. with a curiosity for the truth. Miracles, coincidences, or just luck? What is it? In our last episode, we talked to three of my uncles who had a spiritual encounter while on a hunting trip, and how their prayers were answered by the unlikeliest of companions. In our next interview, we'd be joined by Darlene Woelfel and John Blum, who survived a violent plane crash, and how God's divine providence is visible throughout their story. This is Can You Explain It?
Hello and welcome to Can You Explain It? My name's Thomas Breedlove, standing in for the beautiful, the handsome John Cox. And today I'm with Darlene Woelfel. We're so excited to have her, and she survived a plane crash. Darlene, can you explain that?
Yeah. So it was May 3rd of 2023, and I was on my commercial multi-engine Checkride flight. So what that means is I have a couple licenses that I got already, and this was supposed to be the last flight for me to fly multi-engine aircraft. So, go up with my check instructor, and I'm like nervous before the flight.
Not a cloud in the sky, hardly a whisper of wind, and I just told Darlene, this is no challenge for you to go up on and prove that you have earned a multi-engine rating on top of your commercial certificate. And we just kind of enjoyed it, but not for long, because it wasn't more than maybe 10 minutes into the whole mission that things came apart, literally.
We go northeast of Conroe Airport, because that's where I was flying out of. We start doing the maneuvers for the flight, and we do steep turns, and I do okay with that. I'm like warming up. I'm like, okay, you know what, this is gonna be fine. It's just a check ride. Done them before. And we start setting up for a slow flight. So we just...
What is slow flight?
Really, you're just slowing down the plane, and you get it so slow that it almost doesn't want to fly in a way. So we're putting our gear down, we're putting our flaps down, and during that procedure, we hear a really loud bang, like it sounds like metal in the back of the plane. And I kind of look at my check instructor like, is this part of the check ride? And he looks at me like, I didn't do that. So at that point, he says, my controls.
And instantly, the control yoke in front of us went all the way to the backstop. Hit me in the chest. At Darlene, the airplane pitched almost vertically toward the sky. I looked out and we were going vertical. The airspeed was bleeding off really fast. The airplane stalled.
So the procedure for that is add full power. So he adds full power, and then immediately the aircraft goes full pitch down. So again, the yoke is going all the way forward, and we're trying to fight it. We're trying to pull it, and we're trying to push it when it goes, the other way, and we can't do anything. So we're trying to recover from that stall condition.
It was going wherever it seemed to want, and as it got speed going down, and bang, it went all the way back to our chest again, and the airplane changed direction abruptly. And later on, we checked the G meter, which was in the nose, and we were doing more than 5 Gs of weight as we made those changes. And Darlene, being the physically small person that she is, came out of her seatbelt, their harness, and she was up against the ceiling and down to the seat in very abrupt order. And we knew we couldn't control the plane, and we thought, did something hit us? Did we have a midair? There's a lot of giant buzzards out there, but this was in the back of the plane, and usually birds don't hit you in the back of the plane.
When you're flying, like in the aviation world, you'll have little things go awry, like in the flight, like, oh, this sensor's not correct. Okay, it's fine. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, we'll fix this in a second. It'll be fine. I'm with John. That's his name. I'm with John. He's super experienced. We'll be fine. But
is he weeping at this point?
No,
or is it okay?
No, we're just let's solve the problem. And I'm nervous, but again, I didn't realize just how serious it was. I think I was just too much in shock.
Asked Darlene, she was still trying to cope with it, if she could run the radio and get a distress call out. We were still on the frequency with Conroe Tower, air traffic control. So she tried to get, a mayday out that we were out of control and probably going to go down in our location. And she tried to tune in. There's a transponder on the airplane, which you can put in an emergency code, so anybody on the radar would identify the plane as one in distress.
So I do that. I tell them, we're over Sam Houston Forest. And again, we weren't super sure what was going on. So I just said, we're having an emergency. We're, doing these pretty violent oscillations, and John describes it as my headset coming off. I was going up and down the chair. I remember that feeling of being weightless, because as soon as we would nose over, we would float in our chair. So I couldn't make more radio communication. I just kind of made that initial call, and then they were like, okay, let's try to coordinate.
Is someone else able to see the altitude of the plane? Are they able to see that that's happening, or is that just in-house in the plane, in the cockpit, that you can tell that?
They can see it as well. Okay. And you can even pull up our flight track online, but it was so quick that it doesn't pick it up. And our altitude didn't actually change that a ton, but our pitch attitude, within a little window, we were going up and down.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're going up and down. You're calling out Mayday. You lose your headset. What happens now?
We realized that doing full power or power idle was causing the abrupt pitch changes. So he found kind of a middle range of power that would make the oscillations less, and almost we can manage a descent. He knew we weren't going to make it back to Conroe. He was like, let's just go to that field. One thing to note, before every maneuver, if you're practicing or if you're in a check ride, you pick out a clearing in case you need it. It's just part of the procedure. So he was like, let's go to that field. And it was the one I picked out. So I was like, okay, let's go.
Finally, she banged her head really hard on the control wheel. And I looked over, and she was, not to be gross or anything, but she was bleeding profusely from her forehead. And as I turned and looked toward the back of the plane, there's a bulkhead that separates the passenger cabin from the rest of the tail. And because of the banging around, it came out of its hole, and I could see all the way to the tail, and the tail, due to the G load, was breaking off.
So the plane was the tail was about to crack off, basically. I mean, it's aluminum. It's like a soda can in the air. So he's like, okay, we're not going to go back to Conroe. We're going to go where we can.
So with a little bit of maneuvering with the throttle, finding out that with high power, it would pitch up, and with low power, actually it's the opposite. High power pitch down and the low power pitch up. I found kind of a happy medium where it was it was still going up and down, but not as radical as initially. So we let the airplane lose its altitude. We tried to make adjustments working together as best we could so that we would impact the ground, hopefully right side up. I decided that we'd shut the engines off before ground impact because I wanted to reduce any kind of chance of a pending fire, because we left the airport with full fuel tanks and we'd only flown maybe 15 minutes. So we had about 90 gallons of very explosive aviation gas still on board. And there was one clearing that we had identified even before we did the maneuvers, and that's what we aimed for, and used the tops of the trees to lose some of the excess speed. I had learned that from some firefighters, the guys that dive bomb water on forest fires around here, that use the top of the trees and engines are shut off, reduce the speed, keep the airplane, fly it all the way to the ground.
And what are you thinking on the way down? Like, I mean, do you even have time to think?
Not really.
Okay.
It was definitely just a state of shock because I'm like, there's no way this is actually happening. Because like you practice just emergencies, but there's
So you're not
nothing
thinking,
like
am I going to die? That kind of thing. Is that even
no.
going through your mind? Really?
No, kind of like you said though, like there's not enough time for me to think.
Like
I
that.
probably said a prayer. I don't know. I was probably like, God help us. So at that point, we're descending. Parts of the descent to the field are a little blurry for me.
But during the flight, when Darlene was basically losing consciousness, so that's, even to this day, I don't think she remembers a lot from that part of the flight, and she'll admit that, wow, some of it's coming back, some of it's not. But when we were heading toward the ground, vertically, right toward the ground, I remember we said out loud, not today, God, not today. So we impacted this grassy field, which looked like from the air, like you're landing on a golf green, which I go, wow, this is ideal. But getting closer, it was nothing but tall grass. So the grass was maybe 2 feet thick. We had maybe 6 inches of rain the day before, so it was a muddy bog. And we settled into the grass maybe about 90 miles an hour. But in the grass were some tree stumps. So we knocked the left wing off, the windshield was destroyed, then the right wing hit, so we were doing little pirouettes as we slid to a stop.
We decided to keep the landing gear in the aircraft because if we landed with it down, we would probably just nose over and flip. And those are things we were talking about on the way down, like, okay, are we going to do gear? Are we going to lower our flaps? And we just decided if we change anything, we don't know if it's going to do the oscillations again. So we kind of try not to change too much because at that point we had a little bit of control.
We were perfectly level, and then we were flaring the airplane thinking the top of the grass was the ground, but actually we sunk down another couple feet. So we did leave. When we went back there, we limped out there a week or two later and could see the divot that the airplane left, and then when it hit the stump, it kind of turned 90 degrees and it was sliding sideways. And the windshield had been knocked out from the tree impact and the side windows, which I didn't expect. I didn't think those little tree limbs would have that much force to knock out that plexiglass windshield, but it did. And then all the mud was coming through as we were sliding in that muck. And I remember we had headsets on, and my headset was turned sideways and down over my shoulder. And I was wearing sunglasses, and they were smashed. The lenses were gone, and it was all wrapped around one ear. So all that impact and all that happened over a bit, but it was like a snap of a finger, and there I am. We're stopped, and I'm going, I can't breathe. And I was trying to start getting the wind knocked out of you. And out in that muddy field, there was fire ants. I saw snakes off to the side. There were some feral hogs. I mean, that's all we needed, to crawl away from the plane and be sitting there looking at some hog wanting to sniff at you or laying some fire ants.
Okay, so is this common? Like,
No.
Okay, like.
So what happened? Yeah. Again, we didn't understand completely what had happened until they had a team of investigators come look at it with the FAA. But the investigator who came out, he said he looked at the tail end of the plane and he knew exactly what had happened. And what had happened was that
Oh, hello there. I didn't see it. I was just watching one of the latest Can You Explain It episodes. What's that? You like my Can You Explain It crew t-shirt and you want one for yourself? Well, why didn't you say so? All you gotta do is go to canyouexplainit.store and you can claim one of these bad boys for yourself. And while you're there, go ahead and pick up an embroidered hoodie. Your support helps fund this channel so we can continue to make videos. Okay, now back to the video. Shh, quiet on set.
What had happened was a bolt had broken in the tail assembly that ran that stabilator elevator control that helps pitch the airplane up and down. And once that bolt broke, we lost all control, and it was just based on the airflow coming from the engines and the forward speed that was driving that tail either full up or full down. And luckily we found a happy medium, because if it had gone 2 or 3 more of those full up, full down cycles, we'd have lost the tail.
So the way the plane works, if you pull back on the yoke, plane goes up. But what the tail is doing in the back of the aircraft is that it's also going up. So it's changing the deflection of the wind. So if you go like this, tail goes up, and then you're able to climb.
Mm-hmm.
So the bolt was connecting the tail end, what we call the stabilator, to the trim.
Okay.
And the trim, if you're pulling back, when you actuate the trim, you don't have to pull so hard. So it relieves pressure within the aircraft. The bolt separated from the trim to the tail. So the trim was just flapping like a barn door in the wind.
Jeez.
So that's why we had no pitch control, because the wind was just deflecting it whichever way we wanted to go.
And when I talked to the NTSB investigator, he says, I got to tell you folks that we've had a number of accidents similar to this over the years, and you are the first pilots we've ever been able to interview after the event. And that kind of gave me the shudders to think that, people died because of this failure that was known in the airplane. And it's not something we could see when we pre-flighted and inspected the plane. It was a bolt that broke inside its coupling. So you look at the bolt, which we could see on the ground inspection, but at the head and the nut on either side, they all look perfect.
Wow.
But between, it was definitely, when they looked at the bolts and the rest of the fleet, they found they get rusty and they got weak, and all that pressure caused that bolt to fracture. Now, obviously, we couldn't find that bolt because it fell somewhere out over the forest, but the manufacturer and people that own these planes have gone back and made sure that now they have 2 bolts in that connection, but we weren't that lucky.
Yeah, the stabilator trim assembly bolt separated in flight. Like for these flights, anytime you go flying, you do a walk around like a pre-flight, and you check your gas, you check your oil, you check all your flight control surfaces, like, the screws, the bolts, the nuts and bolts and everything. So we checked that on pre-flight, and like you can be sure I checked that on pre-flight because it was a Checkride.
Wow. So this isn't a very common thing to happen. I mean, having a bolt like that. I mean,
no, it's they say aviation is inherently risky, and it's a pilot's job to keep that risk to a minimum. And we know that structurally things wear out. This airplane was built in 1974, but it had good maintenance all along the way. But thousands of hours on the airframe, and that bolt looked like it had never been taken out or replaced. When we finally got back to the flight school after being in the hospital, I mean, these guys in the shop were felt responsible. They should have had x-ray vision. They should have seen that. And especially the one mechanic that had worked on that tail assembly just the day before. But what he was doing after FAA inspection had nothing to do with putting pressure on that bolt to cause the fracture in the brake.
have you ever had anything like this occur to you before? Like any like emergencies or just crazy incidences like that, where you've had to, be quick to react?
Well, I've been in aviation for, the plaque here says 54 years. I've been actively flying. Have not had one that resulted in having to take the airplane down off airport. But, I've had small encounters. I'm lucky to have not been really faced with the ultimate emergency. I've had an engine failure in flight. I've had there was one that, I don't know, back in 1989, there was an event where a United DC-10 was going from Denver to Chicago and lost all its hydraulics over Sioux City, Iowa. And it tumbled in for a landing. And I don't know if you heard of the event at Sioux City, Flight 232. But I was on that flight, but I wasn't the pilot. I was going to be a passenger. Leaving training in Denver, getting on that plane to go to Chicago at the last second, I had forgot we had to wear a sport jacket or a business suit for training. I had left it back at the training center, so I went back, and when I got over to the plane, which was 232, all the seats were full. So the gate agent said, "Well, we got good news. Bad news is the seat's full. Good news is there's another DC-10 leaving in a half hour across the hall, and you get to sit in first class." Well, that airplane went off and had that hydraulic failure, and all my friends who were in class with me going back to Chicago died in that crash. I didn't. And the captain on the flight was a friend of mine, and a month or two after he recovered, because he did live through it, he came out. We had dinner with our wives and figured out, and he said to me in front of all kinds of people, he said, he's not a God-fearing person, but he said there's something that kept you off that flight that day. And you call it luck, call it fate, call it divine intervention, whatever you want to say. You basically live to fight another day. Well, then we get to this Seneca, and is that strike two? I don't know, but I'd rather be lucky than good any day. But from that accident, I learned how to deal with that runaway stabilator, because that's what happened on the DC-10. And we practiced that in the simulator. And then the maneuver that it got itself into, I never heard this word before then, was called a phugoid. I don't know if you ever heard that word phugoid, where, the airplane gets into a dynamic wave, and the only way that you could dampen it is with finding the right power setting. But that went through my mind in the Seneca to try to dampen that huge gyrations going up and down that was breaking the plane in flight. So I guess I can point back to that as some experience that kind of filtered through the old long-term memory and got out and played a positive role, I believe.
John surviving not one, but two plane crash events definitely raised more questions in me. Some that we'd have to save for later. For now, we would stay on track.
And that was the tail number?
Yeah, 28 Hotel Echo. You know what's funny? We nicknamed this plane Highly Explosive because the last two letters are HE.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay.
I don't know. We nicknamed it before
Thank God it wasn't.
No, right? I'm glad it didn't explode. But yeah, this is...
Very cool.
I don't know what part I hit my head on. It might have been here. It might have been here. Like, you can even see, like, Piper is the manufacturer. So there's a P. So there's a crack there.
From maybe where you hit your head?
Somewhere. So.
Jeez.
Ta-da.
Was it just out of your head that you were bleeding out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so head injury, that was like the first visible injury that I had hit my head really hard. So he helps me out. We kind of crawl over the wing into the grass, and we just crawl as far as we can, and it's like maybe 40 feet or so.
So you probably can't really walk here because you're concussed, right? Yeah. So you're probably very woozy.
Mm-hmm.
What was he like? What was John like at this point?
He had broke his sternum.
Oh, geez.
So he could barely breathe. And he, like, I remember him saying, like, I can't breathe. But he's helping me get out of the plane still. Like, we're desperate.
The doors were a bit jammed, and I don't know how I was able to do it, but when we got stopped, I just said to Darlene, we gotta get out of here. And I couldn't breathe. My chest felt, just impacted. That was probably the adrenaline, I guess it was, the rush. Pushed the door out, threw it over the right engine, got out of the plane, turned around and grabbed Darlene and pulled her out over the wing. And we stumbled maybe 50 yards away before we couldn't go any further, and found a kind of a dry spot to lay down, and I looked back, and at least the airplane did not catch fire.
How long were you guys there before people show up to help?
It felt like a long time.
I'm sure.
You know, it's really interesting. When we made the Mayday call, there was an aircraft flying really close to where we were. It's like a practice area where people, like, we can go up and do our maneuvers, clear of any airspace. So we're out there, and there's another aircraft, and they hear me make the Mayday call, and they see us on their GPS because you can see other traffic in the air. So they're like, let's go make sure they're okay. So they fly over. They tell air traffic control, ATC, that they see us in the field, but we haven't gotten out yet. And I've been able to, like, talk to those girls. There were 2 girls flying that plane. And, like, they're friends now, I guess. And they say, like, again, you know, it felt like forever. Because they're just waiting to see if anyone, like, made it. And it might have been, like, a minute or 2. But then we got out, and so they report, like, okay, they're out of the aircraft. We don't see any fire. They're laying in the field. So they were able to, ATC was able to tell EMS exactly where we
ATC,
were.
air traffic control, tells EMS, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that might have been, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes.
So the responders, I mean, they were wonderful. They had to muck through all this mud, and it was at least 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile from a road. They got to us. They couldn't use their four-wheel, you know, the swamp buggies, and that they wouldn't make it. So they had to lift us over fences, and Darlene went by helicopter to emergency room, and I got to ride in a bumpy wagon. And we were severely injured. She had broken her back, had the nasty cut on her face, her forehead. I had broken my sternum and my pelvis, 4 vertebrae in my back, my tailbone, and it just was a mess.
We were trying to stop the bleeding, like, as best as we could. So we actually used my t-shirt. We wrapped my head. At one point, I had my head resting on John's knee to just have some compression on it. So he ended up having my blood all over him, which the EMS, when they showed up, they thought he was severely injured because I guess I had my shirt covering it at that point. So they were focusing on him. He was like, no, you have to help her. Like, she's, you know, the one bleeding out. And then they were able to, you know, help both of us, but their attention was kind of, like, pointed to that because he, like, called them out towards that. I remember looking to, like, my left and seeing the plane and seeing, you know, mostly the front end of it completely damaged. The tail is bent. A wing is off. And thinking, like, I just saw that plane, you know, not even 30 minutes ago on the ramp. And that was so surreal because at that point I had been working at the flight school and I was working the front desk. So, like, I made sure those aircraft were fueled up. I made sure they're, you know, maintenance ready, kind of stuff like that, scheduling. That's kind of when it hit me, like, what we had just gone through. I don't remember feeling pain from my head. Like, it was, your body goes into, like, shock, adrenaline.
Yep.
Which, like, is a good thing because, you know.
It would hurt.
Yeah, that would have hurt a lot. So I looked to John and I'm like, I think we need to pray. Like, we should pray. So I hold his hand and I start praying. And I start praying Psalm 23. And I had, like, grown up memorizing that. But just a couple months before, a friend and I were like, hey, we should memorize that verse. Like, just commit it to memory for the sake of, you know, memorizing scripture.
Yeah.
So I'm praying it, and I'm praying it out loud. And John is saying his own prayer. And that passage goes, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside still waters. And I just kept repeating the whole passage over and over. And looking back, it's really cool to me because, like, I was laying in a field and there's a pond not very far over, and I was like, wow, this is, like, so real. Like,
that's
seeing
awesome.
the scripture kind of come to life like that. So that was a very prominent, you know, moment that I remember from that. Also, laying there praying, I start to see aircraft circling. And that was, like, such a relief because I knew, like, okay, someone knows where we are. Help is on the way. I don't remember this point, but John describes that whenever they were trying to get me to the helicopter and get him on a stretcher and everything, he said that they had to like pry our hands apart because we were just, holding on the whole time. So that's just like, that shows how like desperate of a situation was. He had been a professor of mine at my school teaching ground school lessons. I had always looked up to him, the legendary pilot, retired United captain. Whenever, everything kind of hit the fan in the plane, we start working as a team. Like, it wasn't me taking a check ride and him just, managing and monitoring it. It was like, okay, we're trying to survive. Something that he describes actually in the incident, that when they were going down, something that was going through his mind was like, not today, God. And he says he remembers looking at me, looking very distressed and thinking like, I need to get us both down. Okay.
Point of time during the event, you think, I'm not going to see my wife again. I'm not going to see my kids again, my grandkids. I'm not going to see another beautiful day like this with a blue sky and bright sunshine, flying a little plane, doing what I love. And here it is. That's why I said, not today, God, just not today. And that isn't something I say all the time. I don't, I'm not, like you said, I might appear to be a bit religious. I don't wear it on my, sleeves and signs and all that, but I do have an internal belief. And I know Darlene does. And so we hope to keep people surviving. They may have events, not a plane crash, but like I mentioned earlier, shoot, they have a parent that died, they get sick or have a car accident. We need to persevere. We need to get back on the rails without letting that event drive what we do next.
So he had that, instinct in him. Like, I had to like protect and like help both of us. So I think I give a lot of credit to John for his sound mind in that situation and his experience to get us down safely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're in the hospital. How long is your recovery process? How long are you in the hospital for?
So the incident was on a Wednesday, on the 3rd, and then I was released on the 5th. So I really wasn't in there that long.
You're just there for 2 days?
Yeah.
Wow. You go down in a plane crash and you're out in 2 days?
Yeah.
Are you walking at that point, or?
Kind of. So I had a concussion, laceration of the forehead. One thing that was kind of cool to me was that they were about to like stitch me up, and my dad's like, do you have a plastic surgeon? And they're like, let's make a phone call. So they make a phone call and they're like, yeah, we can get him in tomorrow. Which I'm so glad he did that. Because that guy knows, how to do it good. And I feel like it's healed mostly well. So they, temporarily closed it up, and then I had a plastic surgeon the next morning. On top of that, the laceration, I had a compression fracture in my back.
Oh, geez.
So fractured my spine. I remember asking, like, is this gonna like make me shorter? Because I didn't want to be short. And they're like, only like 1 or 2 millimeters. Like that just shows you like what was going on through my head.
Was that the worst part of it all?
Right? No.
How did it affect you as a pilot?
I mean, again, I was thinking, did I pass my check ride? What does this mean for my training? Like, I had no idea where I'd go from now. I didn't ever feel like I'm gonna give up. But at that point, my medical was kind of like in this limbo state. To fly, you have to get an aviation medical that the FAA approves, just meaning that you're, fit to fly. You don't have any underlying disease that can inhibit your ability to fly.
Sound mind, that kind of thing.
Yep. So concussion's a big thing in aviation. So I started to wonder if I was going to be able to keep my medical and keep flying. So
if it was like, so walk me through that. Mm-hmm. So if you have a major concussion, mm-hmm. that can affect your future ability to be able to fly even after you've recovered. There's still a concern about it? Yeah,
and they describe it, and I might be quoting it wrong, but they describe it if you have an unexplainable loss of consciousness. That's, in the FAA terminology. And obviously I could explain why I lost consciousness, but still it was something I was really worried about. So I had to go to doctors, later on, once I was out of the hospital, I had to go back and forth with the doctors, with the FAA, getting a letter from my doctor, getting it to the FAA, them saying that's not enough documentation, getting it back. And that went on for almost 8 months. I think it went on for 7 months.
It's stressful.
And that whole time, I was just like, am I going to be able to fly? I was in a back brace again because I fractured my spine. I was in a back brace for 8 weeks. The day after they cleared me from wearing it, I went flying in this plane with a friend because I just, like I told him, I just want to get in the air again. I want to make sure like that this doesn't ground me, like that I'm not scared. So when we flew, he flew the whole thing, and it was scary. It was nerve wracking.
sure.
Like every bump, I was kind of like I would tense up, and like I didn't even realize how much like my body remembered it, because like I would feel like, you know, a moment of turbulence, and I would get that like weightless feeling again, like I had in the incident. So that was pretty hard.
So when how quickly were you back in the air? I mean, how quickly was that?
8 weeks.
8 weeks you're back.
Yeah,
in the
it was
air.
right when I was done with my back brace.
Okay, so you got to walk me through that because in 2020, Kobe Bryant went down, 2021, whenever it was, Kobe Bryant went down in a helicopter, and I made a vow that day that I'm never going in a helicopter. I'm never doing it. You were literally in a plane crash, and 8 weeks later,
And then
you're
they
back.
put me in a helicopter.
And then, you got a helicopter, exactly. So why you mentioned you didn't want to be afraid, but, you know, why not be afraid?
Yeah.
You know, like what made you want to get in the air that badly?
I had just always wanted to be a pilot. Like as a kid, I would look up at a plane and just think like, how is like there a person in control of that whole thing? That they're going somewhere cool. I had never been on an airline flight until after I had passed my initial pilot license. But you know, it was always something that stood out to me that I wanted to do. And I still had that passion like after the incident. I was like, I don't want this to get me down in a way. And I had a lot of plans in life. Like I wanted to fly. At that point in time, I wanted to be an airline pilot. So I was like, okay, let's just go fly again.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the idea of fear being the reason for me not to do anything anymore. So like even if I decided, you know, and that flying's not for me, I didn't want it to be because like I was afraid to get back in. So, yeah.
That's good for you. Like, because, I mean, I feel like if I was in a plane crash, I would say to myself, okay, I guess I'm driving. And if I'm going overseas, I'm taking a boat. So walk me through, it sounds like first of all, it sounds like you were just born to fly. Right? You just,
I don't know.
You were made to fly when you're young.
I guess so.
Yeah. Walk me through the impact on your faith, right? So where were you in your faith? You know, you mentioned earlier, I think before we were recording, that you were homeschooled. Were you raised in a Christian family?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had gone to church, like, basically my whole life. I think kind of around 8th grade was really when I sat down and read the Bible for the first time for myself. And then I started to see just, like, the teachings of Jesus. And that was really, I guess, profound for me. Because I didn't really probably didn't pay attention in church. And I started reading the scripture, and then I got really involved in my church at that point. I loved it. Like, I loved learning about God. I loved serving people at church. So I feel like I was pretty rooted in my faith. My faith had never been tested to the extreme that it did, that this accident, you know, led to.
So you kind of grew up in a Christian home. You know, you're pretty devout, probably a lot of it just because of how you were raised, right? After the crash, was there a change that happened? Was it more real to you? Was your faith more real to you? What did that look like?
Yeah. Like I said, it tested the things I already believed. Like scriptures I had remembered, the Psalm 23, I had that memorized for the heck of memorizing it. But now I'm memorizing it because I'm like depending on God that he'll lead me out of the shadow of death, and that he'll lead me, you know, through this pain that I'm feeling physically, and, you know, the fear that I had kind of started to have mentally after that. So I relied on prayer a lot. I had a ton of people, like friends, telling me that they were praying for me after it. Side note, whenever we crashed and we got out of the plane as quickly as we could, our phones, our iPads, our headsets, like everything was still in the plane, my logbook, which is very valuable as a pilot. You don't ever want to lose that. That
Why
was
is that?
still in the plane.
Why don't you want to lose the logbook?
Because it's a record of all your flying, so that's my proof that I've, flown. At that point, I had a little over 300 hours. So if you lose that, you don't have a great way to prove to a potential, airline that you're going to in the future that you have all those hours. Because that's what they want to look at. They want to see that you have hours.
It's not digitized at all?
You can. I just am lazy and I haven't put it on a digital logbook. I should have done that. I still haven't done that.
Fine. Hindsight's 2020, right? But
Yeah.
No, I was thinking, I was like, man, they should really digitize that now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's up to you as the pilot to
Gotcha.
do that. So
What I see is, so in our lives, like, everyone says they believe things until it's tested, right? And when you go through a test or a crash in this instance, like, what you believe is going to be tested in that moment. And what I see is you in the midst of that looking at the shepherd.
Oh,
right? Looking at Jesus. A lot of people might be looking around, oh my gosh, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know if I die today where I'm going to end up. And also, I have no one to be here with me in this, right? You had John, but when you're in the hospital and you're in that room alone, you have nurses and doctors all around. Jesus is in that room with you.
Oh, yeah.
And he's right there next to you. In Psalm 23, it says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And what's really cool about that is there's two sides of the rod and staff. So you picture a shepherd's stick, right? You got the little hook, right? And then it goes down. The rod is to poke, prod, protect, but also he pokes and prods us, right? He pushes us in the direction he wants us to go. But that hook can pull you near when you need to be close to him.
Yeah.
Right? And what's really cool is throughout your story, first of all, I feel like the Lord put John there to be with you.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, it could have been, any other instructor, which I feel like my instructors were very experienced, training up to that Checkride point. But I think there's no other person that could have been better than, him and his experience and his, ability to be calm under pressure. So I agree. I feel like it was definitely like a blessing that that happened on that Checkride with him.
Absolutely. Well, and then not only that, what's inspiring to me is, all of us go through hard times. Not all of us go through a plane crash. But the lesson that I see is when you have a crisis in your life, where are you going to run to? What are you going to go to? And a lot of people, they're gonna go to wherever they feel they're most likely to find comfort, right? So for some people, that might be a person. Some people, that might be a drug. Some people, that might be alcohol. They're going to go wherever they feel safe. In your walk with Jesus, is that how you would describe your walk with him? Is that your safe place, going to spend time with him? Yeah.
Because, even Jesus said himself, in this world you'll have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So, something I tell myself sometimes is, in the end, we win. So it's kind of I don't know, whatever happens, I'm going to be with Jesus Christ in the end. And I just feel like that's, the most comforting thing for me. And,
yeah, I love that.
It carries me through.
Yeah, I love that. My grandfather, I called him Papa. I'm named after him. So he was Tom Breedlove. I'm Thomas Breedlove. Okay. So we're big Nebraska fans. So I grew up watching the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I'm not from Nebraska.
Okay.
But a huge Cornhusker fan because that's where my papa's from. He's from up north. So I grew up in the 90s. He would tape with VHS. He would tape the games and record every Nebraska football game, or at least every big game. And have you ever seen a VHS tape before? Okay. So I have to ask, right? Yes, that's right. Veggie Tales, right? Bob the Builder, you know. But you had that little flat piece, and you could take a piece of tape and write on it. Well, he would write the game, Nebraska versus Oklahoma, and the final score. And so growing up, because Nebraska sucked when I was young, I didn't really watch the real games that were going on now. I was watching those old games on VHS. And during the games, there would always be, a fumble. Nebraska would make a mistake, and I'd worry, oh, crap, we're going to lose the game. Except I already knew the final score. Yeah. And so when bad things started happening, I wasn't afraid. I didn't worry because I knew at the end, Nebraska's going to win this. Yeah. And it's the same in our faith. You know, no matter what we go through, no matter what we walk through, if we keep our eyes on Jesus, we know in the end, he's already said it is finished. And he has already given us the final victory. You know, so after that plane crash, tell me how your faith, was there any like type of transformation? You said it became more real to you, but what happened from there with your walk with the Lord? Were you really having to pray a lot when you were flying those first few times? Like, tell me what it was like.
Yeah. I think of prayer as like part of my pre-flight checklist now. You know, not necessarily out of fear, like, am I gonna die in this next flight? But just like, I don't know, try to invite God like into something that I love so much. And just ask him, like, be with me in this flight. Because when you think about it, like, God knows how to fly that plane better than I do. So why not ask him to help me with it? So I pray for pre-flight. I think the biggest thing that's changed, or maybe that I've grown in or just learned from this whole thing, is prayer. Seeing how God kind of showed scripture and how similar that was to what I was going through, in the field. I also saw just how God used prayer behind the scenes in other people. Whenever my friend heard me make the Mayday call and she was able to contact my mom, a couple minutes before she called my mom had been praying for me because she knew I was on that check ride. She actually saw my location because she was like, oh, Darlene's on her check ride. So she checked it and she saw, oh, she's over the Sam Houston Forest. So, right along, within that hour, within minutes, my mom had been praying, like, God help her get through that check ride. And then she gets that phone call from my friend Holly saying Darlene was in an accident in that check ride. So just saying, like, the scripture talks about God gives us his Holy Spirit that tells us what to pray when we don't know what to pray. And I feel like that was like, boom, like that was so true for my mom, using, my friend, my mom, to pray for me. Like, she didn't know what was going on, but like God, worked that out for her to pray for me. Another way that I just kind of learned like the power of prayer, it was 5 months after the accident. There were a couple posts on Facebook about it. I had shared a little bit about it on Facebook, and this woman had commented on my post saying, your crash saved my life. I was like, what? Is this spam? Like, I went to her account. There was not much on there. I was so confused. I think I responded to her saying, like, I don't know what you mean. Like, is this spam? And she kind of said the same thing again. I was like, what is going on? And then I see a post on her account. It might have been the day after. And she was in a plane accident. A really, really bad crash. Her and another pilot who both survived, thankfully, but she definitely had some serious injuries. And I got to messaging her back and forth. And she said that when she went down and it was nighttime, like, I can't even imagine, But she had gone down at night. And she said that she had seen my post about praying Psalm 23 like a week before her crash.
Wow.
And when she was waiting for rescue, she thought of me and she thought to pray Psalm 23.
Wow.
I was like, if God uses my accident to help, like, someone else, like, cry out to God in a moment of distress, like, maybe that's, part of why I went through that. It's just some things like that go through my mind. So again, like, going back, like, seeing how God uses prayer through other people and, like, even through me has been, like, really, like, encouraging in my faith. Because, when you pray for things, sometimes God doesn't answer it the way you want him to, or you just don't see, like, an answer just at all. But I really believe, like, especially now from this accident, like, whatever you pray, like, I know that God's hearing that and he's working it out in a way that you might not see, in this lifetime. And a verse, like, that I've hold on to, like, from this accident, I think it's 1 Corinthians, and it says, now I know in part, then I'll know fully as I'm fully known.
1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah, 13. Yep. So I think about that a lot with this accident, because, like, going through something like this when I was still in the hospital, when I had just gotten out, when I was trying to get my aviation medical back and cleared to fly, I was thinking, like, I don't know why this happened. Like, I definitely had moments where I was like, why did this happen? And there was other things going on in my life in a very short period of time where I felt like the bottom fell out, basically. And I was like, God like says in his scripture that we don't know like the reason for everything in this lifetime, but like I really believe, one day like when I'm with Christ in heaven, like I won't wonder, because I think it'll be really clear why God has done certain things certain ways. So
Well, the verse that's popping into my mind is all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose, right?
Yeah.
And it's evident that you love God. There's a lot of people that love God that aren't necessarily following his calling for their life. Mm-hmm. So in order for everything to work out, we have to love God and be called and obey. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool about that is, so I lead like a life group at our church, and I'll tell people when they're going through hardship, and that's something that I have to repeat to myself. It's really easy when someone else is going through a hard time to like quote that verse, and like go to Hobby Lobby and buy them a little thing and be like, there you go, all things work together, But when you're going through a hard time, it's something that we can repeat to ourselves. If it's not good yet, God's not done with it yet. Yeah. And what's really cool is he'll use it to help other people, just like that lady who saw it a week before she was in a plane crash. Mm-hmm. I mean, what are the chances of that? Yeah. She comes across your Facebook page. Like that's evidence of God's providence, But what I think about is like throughout Scripture, you can see terrible things that happen to the people of God. And yet God uses it not only for their good, but to bless others. Mm-hmm. And like your story, not only is it going to bless others through what's already happened, through this video, it's going to bless others. There's going to be people, I believe, that will come to Christ through your story because it's a story of faith. Mm-hmm. The Bible says that without faith, it's impossible. It's impossible to please God. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have faith, then there's a pride there, right? Because you say, well, I know better. Mm-hmm. And because I know better, I'm not going to believe you, God, because this should have worked out differently. Yeah. This should have worked out differently. My plane shouldn't have gone down. I'm having to get medically cleared again. I might have failed flight school, whatever was going through your mind. That's what a prideful person would say. But instead, someone who's faith-filled looks at the situation and says, God, I don't know what you're doing, but I know that all things work together for the good, for my good, because I love you. Yeah. And I'm called according to your purpose. And I think of people throughout Scripture, Joseph, he would have never gotten to the palace if he wasn't sold into slavery, if he wasn't jailed. Moses would have never had the burning bush moment with the Lord if he hadn't been exiled and run from Pharaoh after killing that Egyptian in Egypt, right? You can see it over and over and over again. Heck, David's anointed king, and then one day he's just at battle with his brothers, and he's like, who's this uncircumcised Philistine over here? I'm gonna go kill him, right? And then he goes into fame, and then he's in Saul's kingdom and all this stuff. He goes on the run. All of this stuff happened for David's good. But when you're in the midst of it, it doesn't feel like that, And I just see that so clearly in your story that God was moving behind the scenes, not only his providence to keep you safe and to keep you whole for the most part, to be out of the hospital 2 days later is incredible. Yeah. But this story now has been on the news. You helped somebody do you know if that woman who was in the plane crash, if she was a Christian?
Yeah, I think she was. God.
Okay, very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you helped that person in that time of need, and now your story, I believe, is going to help a whole lot more people. Mm-hmm. And so not only is it being worked out for your good, but it's also going to be a blessing to so many people. It's giving you influence with people that you would have never been able to influence.
Yeah. You mentioned the story of Joseph, which I think is Genesis 31, where it talks about and it's Joseph's talking to his brother. He says, like, what you meant for evil, God's using for good and saving of many people. And I don't really know that God caused it to happen. I don't think of it that way. I think sometimes things just happen. Sometimes God allows things to happen. And it's part of that, like, I don't know what the reason was, but, I don't have to. But one day I'll understand it all. But, like, I've done a couple different, like, pilot-type forums where we talk about the accident. I've done it with John a couple times. And those are really interesting because people have aircraft that have a very similar tail design. And usually when we're talking about it, we're talking about it in, like, pretty technical terms, like aviation. But people say, like, I'm going to go home and inspect that bolt, if there's, like, a hairline crack or something. And I've had friends, like, at this airport replace that bolt because they're like, why not? And then they give it to me and they're like, this is a Darlene Bolt. I'm like, thanks, guys. But like, like even if it helps, a couple people keep their planes in better condition, just bring awareness to that kind of flight control failure, and like how we dealt with it in flight. Like I think that's part of, maybe helping someone, maybe a reason for why it happened.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a practical reason it happened that
Yeah.
the Lord's using for good, and then there's a faith side of it too.
Yeah.
Circling back to speak with John, I wanted to find out if he believed there to be a reason for him surviving not one, but 2 plane crash events. Why do you think maybe you were spared, or do you feel like, do you have some mission in this life, or?
If whatever your religion is, or Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, I think we're all searching for what our mission in life might be. And I'm getting a little older now. I think it's not something you can seek and know when you find it. It finds you. And it's maybe here I am mentoring and teaching young people to get into this career, maybe even giving them some guidance as to how to have a more fulfilling life, dealing with some of their life challenges. I mean, I've got 19, 20, 21-year-old students coming in this program, and they're not just looking to learn how to fly and be a professional in aviation. They bring their life with them. But as far as looking for a call in life, I guess when you don't know, it just manifests itself.
What advice could you maybe offer, since you've gone through, sounds like numerous, difficult times? What's advice to just keep going?
Don't hurry is what I've learned. I was reflecting back and always wishing I was older. When I was 14, I couldn't solo a plane till I was 16. So I sat there and I'm thinking, I got to get to be 16. I got to get 16. And then I got to 16 on my birthday, soloed a plane. Then I had to wait till I was 17 to be a private pilot. So I wished for a year. I want to be 17. I want to be 17. Got to be 17, got that. Well, now here I am, way older than that. And I'm still wishing I was 17. The other thing is, how do you perceive your religion, your goals, your ethics, your decision? That grows with you. So you won't know until you're faced with, can I help this person? Do I drive on by? But this human interrelationship is very important. The sad thing that I've seen happen is young people get internalized, they get despaired, they don't talk to anybody. And I've had a 19-year-old student who was just a fantastic young man not too long ago, took his own life. Now, why would that happen? I talked to him a few days before that, no indication whatsoever. Parents didn't see it coming. Model student, star athlete in high school, and just went and took his own life. Can't figure out why. So we go through life, and if we get in despair, we got to understand that don't internalize it. Got to have a best friend. It might not be your parents. It might not be your sister, but it might be that dude, that you hung out with at the motorcycle track or whatever. But you got to have at least one person that can act as a mentor. And if you get in a jam, you can tell them anything, anytime.
Would you consider yourself a mentor for Darlene?
Oh yeah, and she was a mentor for me. I mean, the fact that she's many years younger, I kind of now I feel like Darlene's like an adopted daughter or whatever, because I even watch out for her when she says she's got a new boyfriend. I said I got to meet him, that kind of thing. But I think she might look towards me as a mentor. I have that responsibility, but yet I look to her, the strength that she had at age 20, the ability to stay calm. She could have been freaking out, screaming, and been absolutely nuts, but she stayed cool. And that will play well when she gets into the next rung higher in her career ladder, that the employer's got to know she stayed cool under fire. And after it's all over, we can all curl up in a ball and cry like a baby, but you got to keep your eye on it. And an old test pilot wrote a book a while back, and he said, you fly the plane to the ground. If you give up on it, you're probably not going to survive. So we had minimal control, but we stayed on it all the way to the ground. And that's what you got to do in whatever you're doing in life, fly it all the way to the ground.
Going through, different things in life, I've seen like how like your faith with Christ is, a day by day learning more and just walking with him and just asking him to be with you and invite him to, lead your steps every day. Just be like something I pray is like, God, would you be my daily bread? Just give me enough strength to get through this day. So I appreciate that you share that my faith is, maybe a bit of encouraging to other people.
Yeah.
But it hasn't always been that way. But like, God says, if you seek me and find me if you seek me with your whole heart, you will find me.
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines.
Yep.
I feel like it's really true.
Yep.
So if anyone is feeling like they don't have, faith that could get them through a plane crash, like they just ask God to like be with you in this day, in this moment, not about, tomorrow or, this job interview next week. Just ask him to be with you right now in this moment. I think God's very faithful to answer that.
Yeah. So the Bible says that he's faithful even when we're faithless.
Uh-huh.
Even when we don't have any faith to give, he's faithful. And that's definitely the case in your life, which is awesome.
Amen.
It's about time. I've been waiting for so long. It's about time. I can feel it coming on. There's a magic moment I've been hanging on. It's about time. It's about